for you, and you can go right ahead now. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all for attending today and taking time out of your day for the presentation. Just so you're aware, on the DPS legal team, we also have our general counsel on, Mitchell Kroc, who you might hear from as well during the question and answer portion of the presentation. So today we'll be going over procurement fundamentals to kind of give you an overview of how to do business with the city of Chicago. And just to give you an idea of where what we'll be covering for topics today, we'll be starting with a department overview, then going into some primary laws that govern the procurement process. We'll go over some key terms that you'll see come up not only through this presentation, but also anytime you're bidding for business with the city. We'll talk about the different types of procurement we do, certification, contract monitoring, and compliance. We'll also touch upon some programs and bid incentives the city has. We'll go over some more sources you can find on the DPS website, and then we'll just close out with an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have about the presentation as well. So for our department overview, DPS is the contracting authority for procuring goods and services for the city of Chicago. And we work together as a team with our customers to guarantee an open, fair, and timely process by establishing, communicating, and enforcing superior business practices. Now, anytime you're doing business with the city, there are going to be two main laws you want to keep in mind that govern our different processes. The first is the Municipal Purchasing Act, and the second is Chapter 2-92 of the Municipal Code of Chicago. The first is the state level statute. So you kind of want to think about that as the biggest overview of the rules that need to be followed. And then when you want the more specific details that kind of fill in under those rules, if you look to the municipal code, that's where you're going to see all the city ordinances that are a little more specific and govern the processes. There are some terms that you'll see come up a lot when you're looking to do business with the city. So we just want to make sure everyone's familiar and knows what we mean when we reference these terms. The first is the bid package, and this is a set of documents that's issued by the city to solicit bids for goods and services. If you're familiar with doing business with the city, you might be used to picking up a paper copy of the bid package. We've now switched over, everything's electronic, and you can access bid packages for any bids online through the iSupplier system. And then the next term we want to make sure you're familiar with is addendums. So anytime there has to be a change to the requirements in either an invitation to bid, a request for qualification, or a request for proposals, we'll issue an addendum. All of those addendums will be uploaded to the e-procurement system. And for all vendors who registered for the solicitation, you'll get a notice that that addendum has been posted. You can also get notice of the addendum for any vendors who email bidandbond@cityofchicago.org requesting to be placed on the takeout list for any bid. Two other important terms. One is the contract, and this will just be the ultimate written agreement between the city and vendor to procure goods and services. This will be where you see all the terms and conditions you've agreed to if you're awarded a contract. And there are a number of different forms of contracts that we do. We'll discuss the different forms in a little more detail later in this presentation. And the final term to touch upon is just amendments or modifications. And these are any documents that formally change the terms and conditions of contracts. So these are another one that we have a lot of different forms for. One that's probably comes up the most often that you might be familiar with are change orders to our construction contracts. And then you've heard me already mention that we do quite a few different types of procurements. Our 5 types that we're going to go over today are small orders, competitive bids, requests for proposals or RFPs, requests for qualifications or RFQs, and job order contracts, which you might hear shortened to JOC. And the first are small orders. This is kind of the least formal solicitation process we have, and it's usually the more expedited process. It can be used for procuring any goods and services that are less than or equal to $250,000. And just a flag for any of these where bids are over $10,000, you will end up having minority-owned business enterprise and women-owned business enterprise goals. And we get into a little more of the specifics of what those goals are and how you can reach compliance for those in the next section of the presentation. Now, as I mentioned, the small orders are kind of a less formal bid solicitation. And then our competitive bid process is a formal bid solicitation. And this is for procuring any goods and services that are over $250,000. These will always be advertised on the Chicago Tribune newspaper as well as in the Daily. And you can also find them on our website, which is chicago.gov/eprocurement. And as I had mentioned when we were talking about the different definitions, it used to be that if you were bidding, you would pick up your bid package in the bid and bond room, which is in room 103. Now you can just go online and get a bid package for any bid that you're looking to bid on. When you're planning to bid, you want to make sure you look at what the bid solicitation period is for the specific spec. It can vary depending on the solicitation. It'll always be a minimum of 10 days, usually a maximum of 30 days. Every once in a while, that 30 days is exceeded. And then just a flag of something else to look for. Sometimes there's a planned deposit for bids, but that is becoming increasingly rare, so it's not something you'll likely run into. For many competitive bids, there is a pre-bid meeting. So when you're looking at a spec when you first get it, that's one of the things you want to make sure that you look for, whether there's a pre-bid meeting at all. And if there is such a meeting, you want to look at if it's optional or mandatory. If it's mandatory, if you plan to bid, you're going to need to attend that meeting. But if it's listed as optional, you don't need to attend in order to bid, although we highly encourage you to attend. They're very informative and can give you a lot of information that might help you as you're filling out your bid and submitting. During the pre-bid meeting, you go over the requirements for the bidding process, including reviewing the specification. Any concerns about the specification will be addressed. And there's also a question and answer period. So it's a good time if you have any questions about the spec to get those answered. And depending on what comes out of the pre-bid meeting, sometimes there is an addendum or clarifying questions issued regarding the bid documents. As I had mentioned, while there can be a pre-bid meeting, some competitive bids do not have a pre-bid meeting. And if that's the case, we encourage you to make sure that you review the specification and the contract documents during the bid solicitation period. And if you have any questions or concerns that come up as you're reviewing it, specifications will always have the name of a procurement specialist and contact information that you can reach out to with those questions, and you can make sure you get those answered prior to you submitting for the bid. When you are reviewing the bid documents and preparing to submit, this slide is particularly important. You want to make sure that you fill in all the required information in the specification and that you fill it in the format that's required by the spec. You'll also just want to make sure that anything that requires a notary is notarized, and that anywhere that requires a signature, you've not only had it signed, but that you've had it signed by someone who has signing authority to sign on behalf of your firm. All these things I've just mentioned, if you fail to do them, there are reasons that sometimes a bid can be rejected. So we want to make sure your bids don't get rejected for any of those reasons. So just make sure you're reading carefully and responding as the bid documents require. One last thing to do when you're ready to submit your bid is just to check to see if there is a bid bond or a deposit required for the bid. Not all of our competitive bids will have a bid bond or a deposit, but some, particularly oftentimes our construction specs, do have one. So if you do see one, you'll want to make sure that you submit it and you submit it in the form that's requested in the specification. And the bid bond and deposit won't exceed 10% of the contract amount. And finally, just when you're going to submit your bid, you want to make sure you submit it on time by the bid opening date. Unfortunately, we can't accept bids after that time, so you just want to make sure that you get the bid in on time.
And Courtney, if I could, this is Mitchell, if I could jump in for a second. For folks that are perhaps have not bid on city projects since the implementation of iSupplier, if you have a memory of running into the bid and bond room at the last minute with a paper submission, keep in mind that there is startup time in registering for iSupplier and making sure all of your documents are uploaded and submitted through iSupplier. So we do not, as Courtney mentioned, we do not like rejecting low bids because of something not having been submitted with proper signatures. So we do encourage you to start early when submitting through iSupplier. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell. Then following bid submittal will be bid opening, and those occur Monday through Friday, excluding major holidays at 11 a.m. And all of them are streamed virtually via YouTube. Currently, if you would like, you can also attend in person in the City Hall bid and bond room. If you do choose to go in person, just want to flag that you will be required to follow all COVID-19 protocols, so masking, social distancing where possible, and if any other requirements get implemented, you'll just need to, if you plan to go in person. If you want to avoid all of that, you also have the virtual option on YouTube. So during bid opening, bids are opened and they'll all be read out loud and tabulated. And the bid documents will also be reviewed for accuracy and completeness. After bid opening, about 24 hours after that occurs, the bid tabulation can also be viewed online on our DPS website. After bid opening, the award process will begin. So a determination is made regarding bidders' responsiveness and responsibility for award. And responsiveness gets to some of the things we've already talked about in this presentation. It's mainly whether you have followed all of the requirements in the spec. So that's where it becomes really important that you've filled everything out, signed everything, made sure all the formats are followed so that you are considered responsive. And responsibility for award gets at your ability to complete the work that's going to be done. Just as a flag, something that comes up as a question sometimes with responsibility is while some firms that are reputable might be deemed not to be responsible for a particular award. If you're applying as a firm and it would be your first time doing the type of work for this particular type of specification, it's possible if you've done a lot of unrelated work, could have been done great, it's possible that you might be deemed not responsible for this particular award. And it just is kind of a fit issue on that particular spec. But ultimately, the contract will be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder that meets the city's specification. So once the determination has been made regarding those categories, there'll be a recommendation of award, and any accepted bid or bids, depending on the spec, will be packaged, and then they will start to route through the signature and approval process. Who signs can vary a little bit depending on the spec, but usually it'll be the chief procurement officer, the comptroller, and mayor signing. At the time bids are being accepted and packaged is also the point where we would collect any performance and payment bond and insurance from bidders. Now to shift gears a little bit to a different type of procurement process than the competitive bids we've been talking about on the last few slides, we also sometimes use requests for proposals or RFPs. And this is a method that's used to solicit proposals to implement new projects that require professional services. And usually we'll use these if the city doesn't have specific in-house technical experts or resources to work on a project or services. This is a little different than the other procurement types we've talked about, whereas if you have a competitive bid, that bid package is going to have every detail of the project within the bid package, and what you sign will ultimately become the contract. All the details will be there. For the RFP, when that solicitation goes out, the project objectives and scope of services will be in the RFP, but not every detailed aspect of implementing the project will be there. In order to get those details, there'll be an evaluation committee that evaluates the different proposals that are submitted, and they conduct their evaluation based on the criteria that's set out in the RFP. And ultimately, a contract will be awarded to the highest rated and ranked respondent. So unlike competitive bids, low price isn't going to be the only factor that matters within the request for proposals. The details of the evaluation are going to be considered as well within the proposal. An additional procurement type we use are requests for qualification, or an RFQ. And this is a method used to solicit qualifications from companies with a high degree of technical expertise and knowledge in specific disciplines. So this also varies from the other procurement types, where everything we've talked about so far, there's a specific project or services in mind when those solicitations go out. For RFQs, the city will pre-qualify companies and build a vendor pool to respond to future task orders. And evaluation ends up being based on qualifications and technical competence. For our A&E RFQs, you won't see a cost proposal in those. If you bid on those, the fee schedule will end up being negotiated later as part of a master agreement. And our RFQs are used most commonly for A&E design contracts and certain categories of consulting. And finally, the last type of procurement process to go over are job order contracts. And this is a kind of a subcategory of the competitive bids we spoke about earlier. And these contracts are have a firm fixed price, but although they're competitively bid, they're for an indefinite quantity, and they're specifically designed for departments' construction programs. So there will be a minimum price for the contract that you'll be guaranteed if you're awarded the contract, and a maximum amount, but there'll be a range within there that could ultimately end up being the value of the contract. And these are used in order to be kind of a more practical way to address small and medium-sized construction jobs, rather than having departments have to bid out and develop plans and technical specifications for every small and medium-sized construction jobs. They can utilize job order contracts to more efficiently address those size jobs. And the way these work are that general contractors are solicited to respond to job specifications, and these specifications will contain unit price books that have various different construction tasks listed in them. They'll have a description of each task, along with a unit measure and a unit price for each task. So if you are awarded one of these contracts, the city will know exactly what you would be paid for the different project types as they come up. Now, regardless of the procurement process that is used, economic disclosure statements, or EDS, will be required for all applicants. And these address things including disclosure of ownership, as well as different policy issues. They'll ask about, for instance, litigation history, if there has been any criminal activity, and it just essentially helps DPS determine if we're able to do business with the particular applicant. And just a flag to keep in mind why these are always required of the applicant. They're also required of any legal entity that owns more than 7.5% interest whether that's a direct or indirect interest in the applicant firm. So they'll be required to file an EDS when the applicant is submitting for any of the processes we talked about. Now shifting gears a little bit, another large part of what DPS does is certification. Our certification unit can certify firms in 6 different areas. They're all listed here. There's minority-owned business enterprise, women-owned business enterprise owned by people with disabilities, disadvantaged business enterprise, airport concession disadvantaged business enterprise, and veteran-owned business enterprise. Now, in this particular presentation, we can't go through all the specifics of what's required of each of these certification types, but if you do have questions about that, if you go on our website, you can see the specific requirements to be certified in each of these areas. You can, of course, always reach out to us as well regarding those certification types. While there are specific requirements for each of those 6, there are also a few requirements that apply to all 6 categories. The first being that the business must be at least 51% owned and controlled by the qualifying group to which you're applying. So for instance, if you are applying to be an MBE certified firm, the business must be at least 51% owned and controlled by the qualifying minorities, and the same being true for any category that you're applying for. Businesses must also be small businesses, and they need to be considered independent and viable. Now, even regardless of whether you yourself plan to try to be certified as one of these firms, or you're just trying to do business with the city and you yourself are not a certified firm, if you're awarded a contract, there will be certain participation goals you'll need to meet. And for MBE, WBE, and DBE participation goals, we just want to flag for you the different rules that you would go to if you want to see the specifics of those requirements. So for the city's minority-owned and women-owned business enterprise procurement program, you'll go to the Municipal Code of Chicago for all contracts, and for all contracts other than our construction contracts, you'll want to go to section 2-92-420. And then for the construction contracts, you'll also go to the MCC, but you'll just go to a different section, 2-92-650. And then last, if you're looking for the rules regarding participation by disadvantaged business enterprises for any of our federally funded projects, the citation you'll just want to go to is 49 CRF, and you'll want to look in part 26.
We'll throw those in the links to those in the chat. I just wanted to clarify very quickly. Courtney's correct. There will be contract specific goals, but you should check the spec for what those are. Sometimes we go out and they're actually specified to be basically 0% and 0% for goals. So the important thing to do is to always very carefully read your bid documents, because they will lay out in a great amount of detail exactly what the requirements are.
And when you're trying to reach those goals, it's also just important to keep in mind that for any expenditures to actually count towards the goal, the MBE, WBE, or DBE must be performing a commercially useful function. And just so you have the definition of what that formally is, it's that a certified firm performs a commercially useful function when it is responsible for the execution of a distinct element of the work of the contract, which is carried out by actually performing, managing, and supervising the work involved, or fulfilling the responsibilities as a joint venture. And then while you'll always be expected to meet the MBE or WBE goals that are in the contract, sometimes things do come up where a contractor is looking for either a waiver or a reduction of those goals. Sometimes it's during performance of the contract, sometimes that's at the time of contract closeout. If you do find yourself in this situation, it's important to keep in mind that the only way to be considered for that reduction or waiver is if you make a written request to the Chief Procurement Officer for the reduction or waiver. And when you make that written request, you're going to need to be able to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the CPO that you made good faith efforts to meet the MBE and WBE certification goals. The next topic we'll cover is just contract monitoring and compliance. And DPS does monitor the actual utilization of MBEs, WBEs, and DBEs that are listed as subcontractors on the compliance plan. And two things that we'll be looking for compliance with are the Chicago Residency Ordinance requirements, as well as your equal employment opportunity commitments. And with respect to the Chicago Residency Ordinance, this is going to apply for all construction contracts that are estimated at $100,000 or more and are funded by the city. And this ordinance requires 50% of total work hours to be performed by actual residents of the city of Chicago, and for 7.5% of total work hours to be performed by project area residents. We also look for compliance with equal employment opportunity commitments, and these are designed essentially to promote equal opportunity for minorities and for female personnel on city-funded construction projects. So on construction projects that are estimated to be $100,000 or more, the award criteria determination has a canvassing formula that's inserted into them to address these goals, and bidders are invited to propose their minority and female employee utilization goals. When you're looking to meet any of the goals we've been talking about on the last few slides, there are a few ways that you can achieve compliance. One, if the prime contractor is an MBE, WBE, or DBE itself. You can also be joint venturing with MBEs, WBEs, or DBEs. You can subcontract a portion of your work out to one or more MBEs, WBEs, or DBEs. And finally, you can also purchase materials that are going to be used in performance of the contract from one or more MBE, WBE, or DBE. Now, when you're looking to meet your reporting requirements for participation goals, the prime contractor will be responsible for submitting a number of things to DPS. They are the monthly subcontractor payment certification forms, weekly certified payrolls, and waivers of lien. Next, just want to touch upon some programs and bid incentives that the city has. In this particular presentation, we won't have a chance to go in great detail on the different programs and incentives. So I did want to flag that we do offer a separate workshop on the programs you'll see on this slide and the incentives on the next slide. If that's something you're interested in getting more information about, we have a chance to really go in depth in that presentation. We also have additional information about these programs available on the DPS website. And you can, of course, reach out with any questions you have about these programs. And the same applies to all the bid incentives that are on this slide. I won't make you listen to me read through all of these, but these are all bid incentives that exist on our different contracts. The information on each of the incentives will also be in each specification. So when you're applying, bid incentives can be particularly useful because if you qualify for them during bid evaluation, solely for the evaluation purposes, bid incentives can take certain percentages off of your contract-based bid to bring down the price of your contract. And this is just for the evaluation, so you'll still be paid the full amount. But as I had mentioned previously, low price and for competitive bids, we award to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. So if you qualify for these bid incentives, it might be something that helps ultimately result in award of contract for you. Another thing wanted to flag that's newer for doing business with DPS is recently there has been a new executive order on diversity reporting that contains enhanced reporting requirements. And this executive order requires contractors to submit projections regarding when and to what extent it plans to use contract certified firms. And then if participation ends up being below the projected usage, those reports will also include an explanation of why usage is below the projected use and a recovery plan to address that issue. Another thing that is part of this new executive order is diversity programs, and contracts that have agreements with the city are now required to submit annual reports about their business diversity programs, or if you do not have a business diversity program, you would submit that information as well. And this annual report would include information regarding expenditure on goods and services from minority-owned firms and women-owned firms during the prior calendar year. Then just wanted to make sure that we draw a little more attention to the DPS website. I know you've heard me say quite a number of times today that if you're looking for additional information, our website has a lot of resources. It's www.chicago.gov/e-procurement. And on this site, you can find numerous things, including all of our copies of all of our awarded contracts, modifications to those contracts. There are bid tabulations on them. Any of the current bid opportunities will be there. You can also get additional information about the bid incentives, as I touched upon earlier, and you can get additional rules, information on the rules and regulations that govern our processes. And with that, I'll just loop back in Jackie as well, so we can address any questions that you have on any of the topics we covered today.
All right, thank you, Courtney, for sharing that great information, and thank you, Mitchell, for your added information as well. We want to make sure that everyone's question can be answered. So again, if you would use the Q&A panel at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, click on that. If you don't see Q&A, click on the three dots and you will see Q&A, and click on that and type in your question. I think the first question is someone missed the first 20 minutes of the presentation. So Rodney, if you would please, can you send out the links on where we will be posting the PowerPoint and the recording, and we will get that information to you when Rodney sends that out through the chat, so you can look it up, and we'll make sure that that's available for you to be able to see. For the person that typed in, this question is for you, Courtney. The CRO is only for construction projects? They're asking a question here.
Yep, that's going to apply to construction projects that are over $100,000.
Okay. And are there any more questions? And we'll just, if you bear with me, Courtney, just a second, we might have some new typers. So make sure you're putting your questions in the Q&A panel, please, so that we can get that information out to everyone. Ronnie, I know he's still on here. Can you make sure that you're posting, because a lot of folks are looking for the recording and where you can find the PowerPoint. The next question is, I am in the dumping and hauling services business and would like to know where I look for bids for those services.
Yep, you can go onto the DPS website and it'll show all of our current bid opportunities. I don't believe there's a way to be able to sort them just by category, although Mitchell, do you know, is it sortable by category? I don't believe it is. I think it's by what's posted weekly and advertised.
I don't believe that page is sorted by category, but what you could also think about doing is checking out the buying plan, because that will probably be a good way to get a forecast for a specific subset of services over the, the coming months.
All righty. Let's see. Someone typed in that they need help with EDS. How can they get help with EDS?
I'm sorry to cut in, Courtney. I saw the question in advance, so I'm going to put in the chat. There's a page for our EDS that has a lot of information about vendor registration and EDS help desk and such. So I'm going to, if Jackie, if that's the right place to put it, I throw in the chat, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the EDS page.
Yeah. You can throw it in the chat so everybody can see it.
I think that this page will help with your question. And it does have some information about
the contact, because they were looking primarily for the contact.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay, wonderful. Again, can you make sure you're not sending it just to me privately? Can you send it to the Q&A so that everybody can get a copy of the answer? So everybody is informed what the questions are being asked. So if you have additional questions, we want to answer those for you. So I'm giving one last go around before I release them. The webinar is going to be posted. Rodney has put in the chat area where you can find the webinar, where also you will be able to find this PowerPoint after today. So if you would just give us a little time, we normally post these on Friday. So if you would give us a little time, we will be able to post that up for you and get it to you. Okay? If you do not get it, you can contact me at dps.event at cityofchicago.org. Again, that's DPS, Department of Procurement Service, dps.event at cityofchicago.org. Okay.
Hey, Jackie, I'm sorry to cut in. Going back to a prior question about the vendor that was interested in whether we can filter or sort bid opportunities by specific services.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add it looks like you can sort it by broad type. So although it's not going to be as granular as a specific service, you can sort of figure out what category of services, like work services or construction or such, that you're most interested in, and you should be able to sort by that broad category. Sorry to cut back in. I just want to make sure we gave a full answer to the question.
Yeah, we want to make sure you have that. And also feel free, if you haven't jotted it down, Mitchell also gave the link to MCC 2-92. So hopefully you will have that as well. because that's not going to be a part of the PowerPoint. So make sure you jot down or click on that link right now on your computer so that you will have that link kind of stored in there so that you can peruse it after this workshop. Well, I want to thank Courtney and Mitchell both for coming to today's workshop and imparting that great information of how to do business with the city of Chicago. We want to make sure that we're helping all of our vendors out there with the information they need to try to garner more opportunities with the city government. So after this workshop, there is an evaluation. If there's questions or information that you would like us to cover, feel free to put it on that evaluation because I do look at those and I do ask our guest speakers in the coming years, the following year, that we need to update our information to incorporate that within the workshop. So if you think there's something that we need to be covering that we're not covering now, we can look at it and perhaps in the second half of our year, we can make sure that that is being incorporated into the workshop. But for now, we can actually get you the answer to whatever the questions are that you're asking. So with that said, I also want to thank the participants for coming today. As I always end all of our workshops, stay safe, stay well. Wash your hands, social distance, wear your mask, get vaccinated, get your second vaccination, get your booster shot, get whatever it takes for us to be in a room together and be able to network with you and get you this information face to face. We want to, at some point, come back to that and do that again one day. And so to do that, we all have to stay healthy and make sure that we do what is necessary so that we can do that. With that said, I will end by saying thank my guest speakers and everyone. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.